Good evening, my creepy cuties. Who says that? Does someone say that on here already? Can I have it? Welcome back to my channel for the second installment of something you've never heard before. So get your seatbelts on, because today we're taking a ghouls trip down to Nevada. We're gonna check out Area 51. Just kidding, I know you're not stupid. What we're actually doing today is diving into the lore, legends, and facts about Nevada's Pyramid Lake. Curses, mermaids, and disappearances? Oh my. But what really caught my eye, this one. Just pick one. What really caught my eye though that made me want to do this is probably the most well-known legend from this area, the water babies. Maybe you've heard of it, hopefully not, but I am obsessed with crybaby bridge stories. I don't know what it is, but they really get my goat. It's probably because my first unofficial ghost hunt was at a crybaby bridge a million years ago back in high school. And I don't know, they just have my weird little heart, okay? So what could be better than a crybaby bridge than a whole crybaby lake? Slays. I'm so excited. But we have to wait just a minute before we get into that because there is so much going on here that I kind of need to give you a little bit of history about Pyramid Lake in the first place. It's important, okay? The context matters. So just bear with, okay? Bear with. We are briefly going to travel back 2 million years ago to the Pleistocene era, okay? I'm your history teacher. At this time, a large portion of Nevada was actually a giant lake that was home to many large, everything was bigger back then, prehistoric fish, most of which, remember this, are extinct now. Most. But as we know, over time, these large ancient bodies of water will shrink and erode away, evaporate, and become the lakes, oceans, and streams that we now know and are familiar with today. So over the last 2 some odd million years, this giant body of water starts eroding away and forms a still giant, enormous lake, but around it is some pretty inhabitable land now. And wouldn't you know it, about 4,000 years ago, it's looking like a pretty prime piece of real estate and folks start moving in. Now this giant lake was called Lahontan and people would come and go, but for the last 600 years, one tribe made it their home. Now over these last 600 years of Paiute inhabitants on Lake Lahontan, it would continue shrinking and evaporating until today we are only left with 2 small portions, still huge. Modern day Walker Lake and Pyramid Lake. It may look small in comparison to what Lake Lahontan used to be, but I think it's the perfect size. No one likes them too big anyway. Pyramid Lake is still nothing to scoff at though. After all, it used to be the deepest part of what was Lahontan, and is still one of Nevada's largest natural lakes. Suck it, Tahoe. You may be more popular, but he's bigger. So not only does Pyramid Lake have that to boast about, but it is still home to 2 prehistoric fish species that have managed to avoid extinction in its murky depths. It's actually like crystal clear, which is one of the reasons people die there all the time. They can see the bottom, so they think it's not that deep, and then they... One of these is the Lahontan cutthroat trout, so named for this red coloring behind its gills and on its throat. Pretty badass little fish. And the other species is the kiwi. It's a sucker-type bottom feeder that lives on plankton with very kissable lips. That's a spooky-looking son of a bitch. Guys, researching and editing this is like a nightmare horror show. I told you in the last episode I was a thalassophobe, and now here I am, forced to look at this. There is nothing scarier to me than a sucker fucker like this. He's so slimy. Now do not forget about those guys. Keep them up here. Up here. Now it is time for us to get into our first legend, the Stone Mother. Look at this. Oh my god. Wow. Beautiful. I love nature and rocks. The Stone Mother is a tufa rock formation that really, incredibly, uncannily looks like a hooded woman solemnly looking out over the lake with an empty basket fallen over at her side. Can you believe that? That is so cool. Now, feats of nature aside, the Stone Mother is so much more than just a cool rock to the Paiute people. She is a sacred site and basically their creation story. So I'm going to give you a quick rundown basically of my understanding, and I'm going to leave some links to some more appropriate sources than a silly white girl sitting in her silly pink room. I don't know, just that's what feels right. So you can go listen and read it for yourself. Now, as it goes with ancient legends, it kind of turns into a game of telephone, and there becomes multiple different tellings depending on who you ask. So I'm going to do my best here to give you the gist. So the Stone Mother tells the story of the first man and woman, and they both thought that they were alone in this world until one day he comes across some very womanly prints in the sand. He follows them and he finds her. So for a while they live together happily and they start having children. Now in a few of the tellings it was many children, and in a few it was 2 boys and 2 girls. But the most common one I came across was many, so I'm just going to stick with many. So they did their best to raise their children with morals and values and to be the best people that they could be. But as the children got older, they started arguing. Some of the children began lying, stealing from the other siblings, and being downright bullies. The man and woman exhausted all efforts to try to do anything they could to get their children to get along, but nothing was working at all. And so the father came to a last resort. He sat the entire family down and told the children that were causing all the trouble that they would be sent east until they could come to their senses and return home and live with the rest of the family in peace. And he said that as for himself, he would return to his home in the sky. Now, when all the children die, he told them that all they had to do to get to his home in the sky would be to follow the dusty road. And as he said this, he pointed up to the sky above the pyramid, and at this time, the Milky Way could clearly be seen, and he was referring to this as the dusty road, and all they had to do was travel up the pyramid, up the road, and that they could all live together in harmony once again. So he left to his home in the sky, the naughty children left to go east, and the good children stayed at Pyramid Lake with the mother. So as time went on, the mother lost hope that her children would ever come to their senses and return, so she sat on a rock near the river, looking east, and she cried. She cried so profusely that her tears began to form a lake underneath of her, and she sat there for so long that her heart grew cold, so cold that it turned her to stone. But the good children remained near the lake and near their mother, and they formed the tribe that is now the Paiute people. That's a very bittersweet ending, but there is an alternate, much sadder ending to this story. In this ending, the good children who stayed still ended up forming the Paiute people, but the children who headed east ended up forming their own tribe, and they did eventually come back. But soon, the 2 tribes would begin arguing again, and the mother became so weary of watching her children argue that she went and sat down on a rock. She sat there watching them quarrel with each other for so long that again her tears formed a lake. And again she did turn to stone, watching over them, waiting for the day that they got along together again, but they never did. So this story is incredible and heartbreaking, but I think it's clear to me that Pyramid Lake is not off to a great start and already steeped in tragedy. Now, moving on a few hundred years, we find ourselves at the peak of the gold rush. What a time to be alive. The gold rush brought settlers and inevitably war to christen this already tragic place with bloodshed. So, it's 1859, and the population in Nevada is booming. People are flocking to Silver City and Gold Hill. Creative, very creative, guys. Now look, this would be all fine and good if it wasn't severely encroaching on the Paiute people's land and already well-established way of life. I mean, not only was their territory being exploited for precious metals, but now their resources were also being exploited because the Pony Express is in town. That means that they had set up a bunch of new stations along the river and throughout Paiute territory. And it's the Pony Express. There are ponies. Horses eat and drink a lot. Not only this, but the settlers moving in were bringing their cattle. So the already, I don't want to say barren, but barren landscape was not enough to sustain both the Paiute people and the settlers and their cattle and the horses. And so with all of these people and new animals taking up resources, the Paiutes were not left with much. They quickly realized that with their land being depleted like this, they were under threat. So clearly tensions between the natives and the settlers were rising until things reached a boiling point when 2 white men were found. So because of this, the settlers began threatening the Paiute people and trying to get them out of their own rightful territory. Shame. During this time, Chief Numaga had lots of meetings with his people trying to figure out what their next move should be. Numaga pushed for peace and for his people to stand their ground, giving them this warning. They will come like the sand in a whirlwind and drive you from your homes. You will be forced among the barren rocks of the north, where your ponies will die, where you will see the women and old men starve, and listen to the cries of your children for food. He knew that the settlers had more people and better resources. He did not want to fight. This was until they found that 2 young girls had been kidnapped from them. They had been gone for quite a while, but their families did not give up hope. Now, some of the tribesmen went out to one of the Pony Express stops to make a trade. This would not go well, because in the barn, right next to the stop where they kept the ponies, the tribesmen could hear their 2 missing girls. They had been held captive and raped by 2 of the Williams brothers that owned this particular station. The Paiute men were outraged. The 2 Williams brothers burnt the express station to the ground, killing 3 other men. War had officially begun. Chief Numaga knew now that they had no other option but to fight. He prepared his people, and in May 1860, they had their first battle. The Paiute people got the first win when they were able to lure some of the settlers' forces into an ambush. To the settlers, it just seemed like there was 2 of them, and they chased them along the banks of Pyramid Lake, right into the rest of their forces. Here, the Paiutes were able to kill Major Ormsby and 80 other men. The next battle would not go so well for them. This second battle took place June 2nd, the same year, in nearly the exact same spot as the first battle. But this time, the settlers had the advantage of numbers. The settlers rallied forces from surrounding settlements and also even got some U.S. Army troops. So because of this, the settlers suffered only a few casualties, whereas the Paiutes lost over 150 men. The only reason that this wasn't an all-out massacre is because it started getting dark out, and now the Paiutes had the home field advantage and were able to slip away and retreat into the night. This victory for the settlers now meant that Numaga's prediction had come true, and the Paiutes were pushed into what is now the Pyramid Lake Reservation. That was super hard. Wartime history is very confusing to me. But there is a silver lining, because it is said that today you can still see cavalry, whatever. You can still see soldiers riding their horses along the banks. Well, they're ghosts, but... Okay, so now we're moving out of history, which I still think is fun, and it gives important contexts. I understand if you don't, however, your opinion is wrong. But we can set our differences aside and get into the fun stuff now. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Pyramid Lake is practically the Bermuda Triangle of Nevada. UFOs, which I am leaving out of this video because, like, it's Nevada. Are there ants in an anthill? Big surprise. Paranormal phenomenon, sea monsters, strange disappearances, the whole package. Now, it is well known that these are not the safest waters for swimmers and even well-seasoned fishermen. This results in a rash of missing people and bodies being found in and near the lake every single year, mostly in the springtime. Could lost spirits from the war be using this time frame as a window to come back and exact revenge? I don't know about that, but that is just one of the many paranormal and still not very normal activities that these disappearances are blamed on. So, what we've all been waiting for, let's start with the most popular theory as to why these disappearances are happening. It has long been reported by locals and visitors that the distant laughter, cries, and screams of children can be heard echoing out over the lake. Now, there are 2 legends surrounding the water babies to get into, so I'll give you the most common version first. Now, it's been said for centuries that before the white man ever even set foot in Nevada, that it was a very common practice for the Paiute people to take ill, deformed, premature, or just generally weak babies and throw them into the water, discarding them. It's believed that the tribe was doing this in an effort to make sure that only the strongest, healthiest babies survived into adulthood so that they would pass down their superior genes in order to keep the tribe strong so that they could continue surviving in this very harsh and unforgiving landscape. Now, as we all know, out of sight does not mean out of mind. Because of the tragic nature of their the babies' souls did not rest and remained in the lake. They're believed to not only be mischievous tricksters, but also very dangerous. They have their own little catchphrase that goes like, if you hear one, it's a bad omen. But if you see one, you're already dead. Now, if you have a close encounter with a water baby and you're lucky enough to ever make it back to shore, it will not be without your boat having sunk, someone being missing, or having your clothes that you left on shore taken. But the water baby's main goal is that because they feel that they have been robbed at their chance of life, they would like to relieve you of yours. Now, it is believed by some that because there's an older version of this legend that already existed before the settlers came, that this is just something that the settlers made up to make the Paiutes look bad. Basically, that the settlers were just using their version of this story to slander and dehumanize the Paiutes so that when wartime did come around, this was already spread about and people already had a negative view of them, so it'd be easier to rally troops. Not saying I believe that that's what happened, but I think that checks out. So now I will tell you the Paiute version of the water baby origin, which is better and more creative anyways. This is the curse of the Pyramid Lake Mermaid. What's that got to do with the water babies? Give me a minute, okay? You'll figure it out soon. It's believed that this story was used by the Paiutes as a cautionary tale for their children to keep them from wandering away from home and too close to the water by themselves. For their safety. For their health. The story goes that once upon a time, a young Paiute man was wandering out by the shores of the lake. I don't know, kicking rocks and plucking petals off a daisy. I don't know what he was doing. But he sees something in the water that catches his eye, and he's not quite sure what he's looking at, but he kind of gets closer to investigate. He doesn't know it yet, but it's a mermaid, and she's watching him, and she's like, wow, he's so brave. He's noticing me. He doesn't even care that I'm like scaly. He's the one. So she fully reveals herself to him. They get to know each other. Bada bing, bada boom, they fall in love. So one day he's like, let's do this. Let's get married. I want to go home and have a traditional wedding, and I want you to meet the folks. So I'm like not sure the logistics of this, if it's like magic or if she's like one of those H2O clear mermaids where she has legs when she's dry. But she goes back to the village with him. So they get back. I can't with this. So they get back, and he's like, can we have your blessing to get married? And the elders are like, not a snowman's chance in hell. And as a matter of fact, take her back to the lake. Take her back. She doesn't even belong in the lake. Take her back to the ocean where she belongs. This is wrong. Well, the lovers do not take this well, but they say fine, and they seemingly head off to do what they were told. They don't. He takes her back to Pyramid Lake so that she can always be close by and he can still visit her. But she's like, I still actually don't like this. I've been exiled. My man's family does not want me to be seen with him. I can't be seen with my man's publicly. And I'm supposed to like live in the depths of my own home. I can't even be seen here or else I'll be thrown in the ocean. Very rude. She did not like that. Would you be chill? I wouldn't. So our girl goes into her full-blown villain era after this. And one day there is 2 women and an infant who go out to the lake to do some washing up. So the mermaid takes the form of a serpent, slithers up, steals the infant while the women aren't looking, drags him down to the depths, and then she takes the baby's form. Well, the women are none the wiser. So they're all done at the lake, they head back to the village, and the young woman starts feeding her baby. And the baby starts eating her. Eating her. Skin. Her body. So the people that are around rush to her aid, and as hard as anyone can try, they cannot pull the spawn off of her. So they're like, this is out of the realm of what we can deal with, and they call in a medicine man, and he comes, figures out what is happening, makes a deal with the mermaid to let the young mother go, restore her back to health, leave the tribe alone, and then she can stay freely in the lake. And she's like, I don't love that, but fine. I'll take it. But now it is said that she still remains in the lake to this day in one form or another, still using the infant's image to lure in unsuspecting white fishermen who don't know of her story, thinking that they are just going to help an actual infant in trouble. But when they come to find the baby, they find their doom. And she will drag them off to the depths where they are never to be seen again. Girl boss, just girly things. Now this is of course until they wash up in nearby Lake Tahoe. But Ivy, Lake Tahoe and Pyramid Lake aren't even connected. Except for that, yes they are. Even though a lot of people say that Tahoe and Pyramid are not connected, they actually are by the little Truckee River. I'll put a picture. But it still doesn't really make sense how the bodies end up in Tahoe because the Truckee River feeds Pyramid Lake from Tahoe. So that means it would have to be traveling against the current, which wouldn't happen. So this is confusing and weird and doesn't make much sense. So this has led people to theorize that there's actually a network of subterranean tunnels underneath the ground. Well, they're subterranean. Now, I think the Park Service did discount this theory, saying that if there were tunnels connecting the two lakes, that Tahoe would drain out very quickly and it would flood Pyramid Lake. But the theorists believe that it does not drain because there's actually suction coming through or something. Suction? I don't know, I'm not a marine botanist. But that there's very strong currents at the bottom of Pyramid Lake that sweeps into these tunnels because of the temperature differences of the very, very, very cold bottom and the top that's warmed by the sun. It's kind of smart. So they believe that the way that these end up in Tahoe, once they sink to the bottom, the strong current sweeps them into the tunnels and they wash up in Tahoe. What do you think? I don't know about that one. Now, building off of the tunnel theory, we're adding monsters into the mix, and be chill with me because I really had to scrounge around Reddit to find this. So it's commonly reported that the surface in certain areas of Pyramid Lake will become very disturbed, just like me. Anyways, they'll become disturbed with crashing waves and all sorts of bizarre activity, and then just stop and be still as it was right before. Now, if the tunnel theory is true, a lot of people theorize, well, not a lot, that these cold currents coming up from the depths of these tunnels causing major temperature shifts and kind of like an underwater tornado, if you will. I won't, but if you will. Now, they believe that these random spikes in turbulence is what's responsible for thrashing around these fishermen's boats, knocking them over, capsizing the boats, and then sucking them down towards the tunnels, never to be seen again. Now, there have also been reported sightings of a large dark mass moving along the top of the water in a very snake-like motion. But this has been diagnosed as large, dense algae blooms, but some are not so convinced. Remember our friend the kiwi? Some believe that these are giant prehistoric kiwi that have managed to avoid poaching and grow to monstrous sizes down inside the tunnels. I can't. I hate to imagine that, first of all, and second of all, it's ridiculous. Maybe. So it's theorized that they really only come out of the tunnels to suck up algae and stuff out of the deepest parts of the lake, and sometimes just kind of accidentally hoover up someone who had gone missing that's still on the bottom of the lake. And that's the reason that they're never found, is because they got eaten by a kiwi. Kind of like that diver in, I think, Lake Erie that got swallowed by a giant catfish. Oh my god, that is the worst, most disgusting way to go. I would rather be launched into the sun. Imagine that being the last thing you see. So, what do you think? Is the lake cursed by centuries of tragedy going all the way back to the Stone Mother's heartbreak? Are fishermen being lured to their deaths by the spirits of discarded infants, angry that their lives had been cut so short? A mermaid seeking revenge? What do you think is happening in the depths of this ancient lake and the skies above? Let me know. If you liked this video, please like this video. If you disliked this video, please like this video. If you liked me, please subscribe. And comment down below what state you think we should sink our teeth into next. Okay, bye!